The protagonist wore armor and a sword in the sunlit lands and trudged through rainforests in the rain. He longed to be an adventurer and lived desperately on this path. However, after 40 years, he acquired baggage. The rain continued to fall, and the man raised his hand to his face. He was referring to the baggage of a weak body and a worn-out heart. He picked up the sword that reflected the light. Despite everything, he continued to try his best to be an adventurer. Until one day, something happened. The man flew into the air, pain on his face, and his things, bags, backpack, sleeping bag, flew in all directions. He had been shot down by a dragon. It was a calm day. There were many clouds floating across the sky. A village was visible near the fir trees, and mountains were visible in the distance on the horizon. A shadow from a nearby tree fell on the closed window. A small bird sat on a branch and chirped. Someone's hand turned the door handle, and a bright light poured into the room through the crack. The dark-haired young man rubbed his eyes, squinting from the sun's glare. The boy and his sister's mother was about to leave, but promised to return soon and asked the main character to take care of Leela. The little girl looked scared and clung to her brother, pulling at the edge of his shirt. But the boy named Arito said goodbye with a smile and wished his mother a happy day. 5 years had passed since he was born in this village. He and his sister, who was still holding on to him, went to another room. The boy sat on the bed, and the girl asked her brother to read her a book. There were 4 of them in the family: him, his father and mother, and his younger sister Leela. The young man opened the book. His attention was drawn to an illustration of a knight. He ran his fingers over the picture. The girl sat nearby and rubbed her eye, looking at the book in bewilderment. She asked the boy who it was. He did not answer her. He looked at the knight's armor and sword in detail. This was his dream for the future. Arito's eyes clouded over. He nodded, thinking that he knew what his dream was, but something began to change. The boy suddenly grew up, and there was no room, no sister Leela, only emptiness. He sat alone, his legs crossed and his head down. The tired look expressed nothing. The man looked into space, his fingers twitched slightly. The hero seemed to come out of a stupor. Questions flashed through his head. Where is he and what is happening? He was sure that the luggage was still with him, so was this really a shock before death? The man raised his head and horror was reflected on his face. He realized that a dragon was in front of him. A huge creature with powerful wings, horns, and long claws sat opposite and calmly looked down, squinting a little. He instinctively reached for his sword, but there was nothing nearby. The hero turned around in confusion, and it became clear that he had no weapon. The dragon stood still and seemed to be waiting for something. The young man felt hopelessness. He understood that this was the end, because this dragon had recently ended his life. Memories of the horrors of that day flashed through his mind. He shuddered. He looked at the dragon defiantly, assuming that it had decided to eat his soul. The hero looked at the monster with a silent question. It looked slightly puzzled. Suddenly, the dragon spoke. She apologized and regretfully admitted that she had not noticed the man when she was chatting with the wind spirits. The former knight was very surprised. The dragon became completely despondent and said that she did not feel sorry for those who challenged her, and it was all because of her carelessness. She wanted to give him a piece of her power and asked him to start a new life. The magical creature caught the man's gaze and said that she was a holy dragon, endowing his soul with the attribute of light. The guy seemed to be thrown back by an invisible force. He disappeared, and a lonely leaf hovered against the cloudy sky. The boy's body rushed into the distance with such speed that it was impossible to even notice him. Only the grass swayed in the wind. The fair-haired knight lay alone in the meadow. Next to him were a sword, a shield, and a bag. He rested his head on his hands and thought about how 40 years had passed since that moment. After reincarnation, he was given the attribute of light. However, the attribute of fire that he had before reincarnation remained, and a new attribute of wind appeared. The young man reflected that having 3 attributes was quite rare. The more attributes he had, the more weapons and items he could be compatible with, and he could gain more power than his status. He picked up his sword and raised it above himself to block out the sun. The shadow of the sword fell on his face, and he looked at it sadly, and then suddenly jumped up. He looked at the valley and the leaves swirling in the wind, and thought about how he hadn't made it in time after all. The knight had no doubt that this time he would be able to make a name for himself as an adventurer. He had many expectations for the future, but he could not get any results and ended up spending 40 years without a home. However, it was too late for him to think about it. He stood up, leaning his hand on his numb legs. The man gathered his things and set off. Behind him, only the mountains were visible. He was thinking that the city was still far away and it would be worth finding a place to spend the night, when suddenly, a bird that flew very close at an incredible speed caught his attention. A whole flock followed the bird, which frightened the traveler very much. He could not understand what it was. Looking back, he was dumbfounded. It was at that moment that a huge dragon was flying from the sky, cutting through the air, towards him. The man could not believe what was happening and did not move from the spot. Horror and the reflection of that very dragon were frozen in his eyes. The knight opened one eye, trying to understand what was happening and where he was. There was nothing around him again. He was floating in the air, confused, with his legs crossed. There was no pain from the collision, and a familiar feeling appeared. It was because he had been here before. He looked around, trying to catch his eye on something. Suddenly, a dragon appeared right in front of him. He was lying opposite and seemed not to notice the man, looking somewhere to the side. The traveler realized that this was the same dragon that had knocked him down a moment ago. He didn't know what to do and looked at the dragon, waiting for an answer. The dragon wept bitterly, wiped away her tears with her claw, and confessed that she was very sorry, because she could not even imagine that there was a man in such a wilderness. The knight stood with his head raised and watched this revelation in shock. He was surprised that such a huge dragon had a female voice, and she answered in the meantime. If he were her enemy, there was no point in expecting forgiveness, but it was her fault that she got too carried away during the flight. She asked for forgiveness and, knowing that it would not be enough, she gave him a piece of her power. The traveler looked exhausted when he heard that he would have to be reborn again. The dark dragon added the attribute of darkness to his soul, and the man watched silently. The dragon flapped its wings and rose above the ground. The knight still hovered in the air. He wondered if a person had ever been born with all 5 attributes at the same time. After reincarnation, as promised, he was given the attribute of darkness, and the attribute of water also appeared. The young man's 3 attributes from his past lives remained intact, and he ended up with 5 attributes. The people around him looked at the young man with admiration, were delighted with his abilities, and their expectations were constantly growing. After all, this was the birth of a genius comparable to the heroes of all times. The young man was not interested in girls and devoted all his time to training. He looked at his sword and thought about how he could not be a hero when he had 5 attributes and put in so much effort. And so the knight was confident that this time, everything would definitely work out. But he was back in that same place, alone with the dragon. Emotions were starting to take over him. He thought it was too much. The hero thought that the 2 times could have been a coincidence, but what was to be expected? He found himself in such a situation again. The traveler's patience was running out and he no longer had decent words, so he began to swear. The dragon silently watched the main character. The dragon thought, rubbing her face with her paw. She agreed that being shot down by a dragon was a rare occurrence, but 3 times could be a curse. She also apologized for being careless during the flight. The knight was only thinking about the fact that he had finally found a dragon with a proper voice. She promised, like the previous ones, to give him a piece of her power. This time, they wished him a happy life. The hero clenched his fists. The dragon of chaos appeared before him. As one of the wings of the 3 divine dragons, she bestowed the attribute of chaos upon his soul. After speaking the words, she slowly began to evaporate. The man watched this wearily. He, too, was becoming faceless, as if dissolving into space. But now he had all the attributes. Thus, Arito had 4 main attributes at his disposal. From the first 2 dragons, he received the attribute of light, which can appear in 1 in 100,000 people, and the attribute of darkness, which only a small number of demi-humans possess. And also, the last dragon gave him the attribute of chaos, which is characteristic only of monsters and objects. This attribute cannot manifest in humans and demi-humans. The attributes are like silk, and having all the attributes he should have gained power comparable to a god. Arito, who was sitting on the bed, suddenly exclaimed that he didn't think that was really the case. Leela, who was nearby, was frightened by her brother's reaction, jumped up and looked at him with her mouth open. She waited silently for her brother to explain himself and simply watched. The boy threw his head back, lamenting, because after 3 lifetimes he had learned that he had very low basic abilities and growth potential. Such things are determined at the level of the soul. While the young man was grieving over his past failures, his sister had already recovered from the unexpected cry and was gradually falling asleep. Arito looked at the picture of the knight in the book. Even if everything was predetermined, it didn't mean he wanted to give up on his dream of becoming an adventurer. He bared his teeth and furrowed his brows in anger, knowing he wouldn't let it happen again. The boy imagined himself in a row with all his past lives, and in each of them he wanted to be an adventurer. Even if he is cursed and destined to die at the hands of a dragon, he definitely wants to become an adventurer and succeed. But the former knight knew that reality was merciless and he was sorely lacking in talent. He looked at his hands sullenly, wondering what he should do now. The boy clenched his fists hard. Arito quickly jumped out of bed and shouted at the top of his lungs that he would become an item enhancement master. His sister was again frightened by such a surprise. But the brother did not pay any attention to her. He looked somewhere into the distance, realizing that he himself was weak. He exclaimed that this was how he was going to fill the gap with objects. Little Leela still didn't understand anything and rubbed her eyes with a confused look, looking at her brother. But if he just used only strong weapons, he might end his life like the last two, such as the fire attribute sword that increases strength and the water attribute armor that self-regenerates. The boy was so absorbed in himself that he didn't notice anything around him. He was flipping through some panel, remembering that there was also wind, earth, light, and darkness. He had all the attributes, including the last one, the attribute of chaos. This rare attribute that opens up completely new possibilities. Arito was absorbed in thoughts, and his sister was almost asleep. The young man was determined to hone his final ability. It wasn't just about becoming stronger, it was about creating something that only he could create, his own armor, weapons, and other things. The knight sat over the split sword. This time, he would make the most of his attributes and become an adventurer. His face was serious, and his eyes were full of determination. Little Arito stood in the middle of the room with a smile, dreamily looking into the distance and hoping that adventurers were popular with girls. Leela did not hear her brother and had already fallen asleep. There were two dragons hovering in the sky. They froze in mid-air, looking straight at each other. One of them swooped down, letting out a loud roar. Then he spread his wings. Large paws with long claws almost touched the ground. It was the dark dragon about to land after its flight. The other dragons reacted to his appearance. Someone nodded, slightly squinting. The second light dragon silently watched the newcomer. The latecomer apologized for not arriving on time and asked how long they had to wait. They assured that they had arrived here quite recently. The lightest dragon held her face with her paw, recalling that it had been about 6 months ago. A friendly conversation began between the dragons. They were waiting for the third one, and one of the dragons was sleeping all this time. The dark dragon was happy, and suggested that the lightest dragon had lost weight. The saint was pleased with such a comment. The second dragon got to the point of the meeting. She said that she had asked them to gather together to find out if they had ever had to end a person's life and then reincarnate them. Both dragons remembered the young man they had accidentally knocked down. The saint said that if she remembered correctly, it was about 80 years ago. She later endowed that man with her attribute. Darkness also plunged into memories and remembered that 40 years had passed since her encounter with the knight, and she also endowed him with her attribute. The third dragon shared with the others that the same thing had happened to her recently, and she had ended up bestowing the attribute of chaos on a human. All three dragons sat opposite each other and did not utter a single word, pondering what had been said earlier. The saint wondered if it could be the same person. She didn't know if it could be a coincidence. The Chaos Dragon nodded, but the third Dark Dragon didn't believe it and thought they were joking. She wondered how it could be such bad luck. Chaos said that she had suspicions that the young man was cursed, but most likely this was not so. Out of curiosity, she decided to look into his soul, and as it turned out, before reincarnation, he already had problems. Darkness and Saint looked at the Chaos Dragon with concern. They did not understand what problems she was talking about. The third dragon lowered her head, her eyes filled with sadness and sympathy. She told him that the man had been given low characteristics at the soul level, as well as extremely low growth potential. Therefore, Chaos concluded that all three lives lived were not very different from each other. Her company could not utter 2 words. They were very surprised by what they heard. The saint thought it was a terrible situation. She thought it would be enough to give him the attribute of light. The Chaos Dragon shared that she had done the same. She was sure that the assembled people were responsible for taking the knight's life and forcing him to live 2 more unhappy lives. The saint countered that they did not know if this was true. Chaos agreed, but also understood that on the other hand, the guy had all 7 attributes. He could become proud of himself, and then the likelihood of an early end to life would increase. The saint frowned and looked determined. She stated that, being connected to God, they could not leave such an outrage. The Dark Dragon said that everything was correct, but she did not understand what they were supposed to do, because in their entire life they could only reward someone with one gift. She continued to think that technically it was one life, however, since the boy had been reborn, it was counted as the beginning of a new life. Thus she did not find what she could bestow upon this man now. After all, she knew that Chaos had already given the young man her attribute. The saint said that they couldn't give the boy anything yet, and besides, Chaos is an attribute that people shouldn't have. It has many advantages, and she thought that was enough. Darkness wanted to know what they should do right now. The Light Dragon replied that she would think about it. The boy had just been born, and she suggested waiting until he grew up. The Dark Dragon looked worried. She had to think if their stats were too huge. They will have to turn into a human, but if the dragons do this, they will not be able to return their characteristics for some time. Darkness and Saint were discussing how they wanted to visit the human city after so long, because it was so much fun. The Chaos Dragon just silently watched their conversation from the side. Chaos was completely dejected, because the dragons had forgotten about her. She began to think, why not break the rule once? Alone, she became increasingly lost in thought. Arito sat with his arms crossed in the garden. His sister was next to him, watching a butterfly fly by. The boy thought about how, having been reincarnated 3 times by the dragons, he had all 7 attributes in his 4th life. Leela reached out her hand to grab the butterfly that was fluttering nearby. Arito chuckled, because even though he knew he had no talent, he had decided to become an item enhancement master. The young man looked at the panel on which his attributes were depicted and understood that their presence should be hidden from everyone. He remembered the disappointments from his past life, which could overtake him in this one, because if the people around him recognized him, they would start considering him a genius. This would ruin all the boy's plans. He didn't pay attention to Leela, who didn't give up trying to catch the butterfly, and thought that he was even glad. His gaze was directed somewhere into the distance. The brother and sister sat near a large, spreading tree, through the crown of which the sun's rays penetrated. Arito looked at the village ahead, the mountains and the boundless sky, admiring the vastness. The boy exhaled and a smile played on his face. He was glad that he was born in this village, because it was not a place that people with the skill of evaluation would visit. The main character had already decided who he would become. It was worth thinking about what to do next. A butterfly, which had attracted his sister's attention, landed on his hair. Leela reached for it, leaning on her brother's shoulders, but the insect flew away. Arito took a small stick and began to draw something on the ground. In order to become a master of enhancing objects, he should first learn the necessary skills for this. He drew a diagram in front of him. One of the blessings of the past deities was the skill system. It allowed one to accumulate experience points and turn them into a skill. And the number of points for obtaining skills depended on the person. The boy thought for a moment, and then smiled broadly. He was happy because he knew that in his case, in the future, he wanted to become a master of enhancing objects. The teacher introduced himself to him and told him that he would need 1,000 points to achieve his goal, 2,000 points to get a D rank, and 3,500 points to get a C rank. Arito stared at the master with wide eyes. He continued to say that for B rank it was 7,000 points, A rank 15,000 points, and S rank 45,000 points. The young man thought that he had good compatibility, and if he was not compatible with this skill, he would need many more points. He needed at least a C rank to be able to work professionally with objects. He started playing with pebbles, estimating that 6,500 points would be needed for a C rank. Skill points will gradually increase in everyday life as well. The door of the house opened slightly. The boy's mother looked out, called the boy by name, and asked whether they had sorted the herbs or not. The brother and sister picked up baskets of herbs from the ground and handed them to her, for which the mother thanked them. Arito thought that the points would increase if he was aware of what was happening. Leela went into the house, and her brother stayed outside and warmed up. He calculated that at 10 years old he would be able to obtain the first skill, and at 15 years old he would improve it to D rank. At this age, he was going to go out into the city, then after a few years of training, he would become a C rank. And after he became independent, he would make full use of all the attributes and improve his skill. He wanted to upgrade it to the highest S rank, because that would be when his adventurer's path would begin. This was his ideal plan for the future. He was dreaming about his future when suddenly someone greeted him and asked if there was anything bothering him. It was a beautiful young girl with long blonde hair. She apologized for addressing him so suddenly. She was wearing a wonderful outfit, with a piece of jewelry tied around her neck and a mantle lying over her shoulders. The wind blew and the leaf-shaped hairpin with a tassel swung in her hair. Arito held his breath and could not take his eyes off the girl. His heart was pounding. The stranger shared her thoughts. It seemed to her that the guy was thinking about something and that's why she became interested. The boy waved his hands in panic, denying that anything had happened, and replied that he was only imagining an ideal future. The girl propped her head up with her hand and looked at the main character with concern, calling him a poor thing. She believed that the future was foggy and could not be predicted. Arito tried to understand why she would say this to a 5-year-old child. He looked at the girl with long hair tied in a braid in confusion. She was stretching her arms towards him, and he was wondering what was wrong with this lady. Suddenly, the stranger hugged him and pressed him to herself. Arito did not have time to understand anything and did not resist. She stroked his head and said that everything would be fine with him, both now and in the distant future. Beads of sweat appeared on the boy's face and hands. He could not understand what was happening. The girl continued to hug him, and the young man wondered what kind of strange situation this was. He tried to calm down and wondered why he had received this reward. The question was never voiced. The boy remained silent, and the stranger suddenly said that divine dragons can bless only once in a lifetime. She looked at the child with sympathy and, still holding him in her arms, said that now that he had been reborn, things were different. She told him to live a happy life this time. The girl added that it was a small gift from her, while the boy still did not understand what she was talking about. She closed her eyes, smiled, and then asked him to forget about it because their meeting was like a bubble that would disappear when it floated up. Arito listened with his eyes closed to the wish of sweet dreams from the girl who was holding his head in her hands. The next moment he suddenly woke up in the meadow. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were wide open, and drool was running from the corner of his mouth. The boy raised himself up on his hands and began to look around, trying to understand how he ended up there. He rubbed the top of his head, remembering what he had been doing. He was sure he had been helping his mother, and then he had met someone. An image of a blonde girl with a braid popped into his head. Suddenly he remembered that he was making a perfect plan for the future. After looking at the panel, he came to the conclusion that he did not have the required number of points to obtain the skill yet. The number 100,101 was displayed on the panel. The boy raised his hand to the screen and clenched his fist, exclaiming that he finally had more than 100 points. Then something stopped him. He listed all the numbers on the panel in the order they appeared, and realized with glee that he had made a mistake. This time, he had more than 100,000 points in his account. His head was buzzing with millions of questions popping up in his head. Arito was surprised and couldn't understand how and where he got so many points in one day. He tried to calm down and put his thoughts in order. He thought it was all a dream. He wondered how he had managed to fall asleep on the side of the road and decided that he should go home and rest. Night gave way to morning and the sun came out instead of the moon. Arito stood alone near the porch of his house and was in no hurry to go inside. The boy already had 100,103 points on his account. He looked at them silently, not understanding how this was possible, so he hadn't dreamed it. Since the points were now more than enough, the former knight came to the church to gain the skill. He looked inside, light was shining through the windows, but there was no one in the church, including the priest. A hooded figure could be seen in one of the very first rows. A boy tiptoed past a sleeping elderly man, trying not to wake him. He found a book that could be used to obtain the skill alone. Although Arito knew that a priest would normally be present, he took a risk and ran his fingers across the panel. A soft sound was heard. He turned around and looked at the hooded man, checking if he was awake. The status was only visible to him, but other people could see similar offers. The young man returned to his work. First, he needed to get the skill. The panel displayed a window asking if he wanted to get the skill of enhancing items for 1,000 points and 2 options. Arito hovered his finger over the yes answer. He hesitated. Fear pierced him. The world seemed to freeze. Something was heard behind him. The protagonist turned around, fearing that the hooded man had woken up, but after a while only his snoring could be heard. The young man watched silently. He exhaled. He was overcome with excitement, but it seemed that there was no danger and he decided to continue what he had started. There was a cell on the panel for enhancing items. He was going to improve his rank. He listed the ones he had and managed to get to the letter A. Finally, the panel displayed the highest SE rank of item enhancement. The boy paused for a moment. He was delighted at the thought that, as a 5-year-old child, he would achieve the skill of enhancing high-ranking items. The thought that this was his ideal plan for the future was interrupted by the voice of the old man from behind. He was surprised that it was already morning and could notice Arito at any second. The young man was horrified. It was time for him to run away from here. Someone loudly exclaimed that Arito had talent, which made the boy flinch and attracted the attention of Leela, who was standing next to her brother. The boy was 10 years old and was helping his uncle Tom, who was a dwarf, improve farming equipment. Tom said that it would be hard to find a dwarf who would chase his dream even in old age, which Arito disagreed with. He thought that his uncle was telling everyone the same thing. Uncle said that gnomes are a race that dreams of creating magnificent objects from scratch. The boys were politely delighted by this, but the boy was actually wondering how many times he was telling this. Uncle Tom knew it was not in their nature to continue someone else's work and start from scratch. However, he simply wanted to create a magnificent outfit. It was no secret that even dwarves needed a lot of time and effort to create items from scratch. Because of this, he left the dwarven village and decided to become an item crafter. He honed his skills at the famous workshop from time to time, but ultimately failed because he only had one attribute. The dwarf told of how he had hit a wall that could not be overcome by effort alone when Arito's sister, still hunting butterflies, rushed past him at incredible speed. The little sister finally achieved her goal. The insect was right in her hands. However, the dwarf began to curse that this girl was a little monster and dangerous. Leela was scared and froze, and her brother, smiling, denied the old man's words. The boy wondered why it was impossible to strengthen one object several times with one attribute. Then he scolded his sister a little for her prank, and the little girl became completely despondent. Uncle Tom propped his head on his hand and grinned at Arito's suggestion. He wished it were that easy. He told the boy that he couldn't strengthen one object infinitely. The gnome tapped the wooden stick he was holding. He continued that he couldn't just take a stick and strengthen it with the earth attribute hundreds of times until it became comparable to steel. The children heard that each object has a certain number of slots that can be filled with attributes. The gnome taught that the number of slots can change depending on the quality of the item, and even if two items are made from the same material, the number of slots will change depending on the different parts. He concluded that with experience and knowledge, one could find out how many times it would be possible to strengthen an item. The boys had long since fallen silent and were silently looking at the storyteller. Arito dared to argue that this could be found out without difficulty, just by having the skill of evaluation. Uncle Tom looked at the young man, surprised by his statement. He disagreed and corrected him, saying that appraisal is a skill that allows you to find out information about the status of a person or object. It allows you to find out about all the available enhancements, but the number of slots will be unknown. Leela said that then knowledge and experience were really important. The gnome coughed. He had cheated when he said that he had the intuition of a master. Tom grinned widely, crossed his arms, and said that, however, there was one way. Arito couldn't believe his ears and was delighted by what he heard, and his little sister silently waited for the continuation of the story. The old man raised his index finger and continued. He said that every master of enhancing objects wants to acquire this skill. It is called analysis. A narrow river flows through the middle of the meadow, forming a small waterfall. The sound of water murmuring can be heard. The boy found himself in nature, in the same meadow, and looked into the distance. He said that analysis is a skill that can clarify the essence of a person or object, which cannot be recognized even through evaluation. There were someone's slippers lying in the tall grass. The protagonist squatted down and picked them up, thinking that someone had probably dropped their shoes. He lifted the slipper higher and opened the panel. He had an idea that he could take them home and try to strengthen them. But Arito quickly abandoned this idea because he did not know the number of slots for strengthening. He looked at the find for some time and then threw it away without regret, saying that he would like to know this data. The boy lay down on the grass, put his hands behind his head, and began to look at the sky. Thoughts swarmed in his head that with the skill of analysis he could find out. He closed his eyes, trying to cope with the anger and frustration that was rolling in. He really wanted to have this skill, but there was some kind of obstacle. Uncle Tom mentioned that the skill of analysis is special and not easy to obtain or learn unless you are born with it. He assured that, unlike other skills, it cannot be learned in the church. It can only be obtained under the condition that you find a super rare artifact or pass divine trials. Arito understood that this skill was extremely difficult to obtain, which made it all the more significant. If he had both SS rank item enhancement and analysis skill at the same time, then as an item enhancement master, he would have nothing to fear. The main character was so inspired by this idea that he immediately jumped up and exclaimed that he had decided everything. Now his new goal will be to get this skill. He stood up and picked up his bag from the ground. He had no knowledge of how to gain the skill, but he was going to start by gathering information. The boy shouted a battle cry and took only one step when he heard a voice behind him and stumbled. The voice announced that his older sister had arrived and asked if the hero was in any trouble. Arito thought that everything was fine before meeting the stranger and turned around, wanting to find out who had disturbed him. A sweet girl with a pendant and hair ornament smiled at him. She assured him that he could tell his sister everything and was convinced that he definitely had problems. The young man looked at the stranger in shock and could not utter a word. He was struck by her beauty, but something was bothering him. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he became even more frightened than before. The guest came very close and towered over the young man. She was very surprised and asked where he got 27,000 points from. The girl looked more closely. In addition to what was said a moment earlier, she saw that Arito had enhanced S-rank items. She wanted to know if she had been beaten to it or not. The boy still looked on silently. There was silence between them. The young man wondered how she could have known all this and was horrified by the thought that she might have the skill of evaluation. The girl thought about it and asked the guy if she understood correctly that he wanted to become a master of enhancing objects. He assured her that everything was correct. Then the girl smiled and suggested a solution to this situation. She stretched out her hands to him and kissed him. Arito froze in place and did not react to her action in any way. He was dumbfounded and could not understand what was happening. The girl smiled and thanked the guy. She looked closely at the main character, waiting for his reaction to what had happened. He began to stutter from the stress he had experienced, but he was still able to ask why she, a stranger, had done this. There was not a single thought in his head. She laughed and answered that it was just a gift to him. The girl smiled broadly, waved her hand at him, and said that his life had not been a success last time, but she hoped that this life he would live happily. Arito became more and more confused. His mind became clouded and he could not understand what she was talking about. Meanwhile, the guest continued and asked to forget about their meeting. She put her finger to her lips and suggested they keep it a secret. Arito dropped his hands to the ground. He was shaking. A white-winged butterfly landed on the young man's hair. He woke up, frowned, and squinted. The guy began to rub his eyes and wonder what kind of glare he saw. The butterfly fluttered and flew away. The boy raised himself up on his elbows and began to look around, trying to figure out where he was. He grabbed his head, began to remember how he helped, and then he got tired and the thread of events eluded him. His gaze fell on the slippers lying nearby. Arito picked them up. He remembered how he wanted to strengthen these slippers, but he couldn't because he didn't know the number of slots. He sat down, crossed his legs, opened the panel and ran his finger across it in a sweeping motion. If he had had the analysis, he would have known exactly how many slots there were. He didn't have that information, so he decided to try to strengthen them. Then he noticed something. The slots with the exact number were displayed on the screen. The hero nodded his head, remembering that this is how it should have looked. Arito realized that the slots weren't supposed to be displayed on his panel. He threw away his slipper and was searching for something on the panel when a notification sounded. The cell he had been longing for appeared before his eyes. His hand froze. The protagonist gained the skill of analysis. He looked at it silently, as if he couldn't believe that this was actually happening. The boy looked ahead and tried to comprehend everything. He could not find an explanation for what had happened while he was sleeping. He felt terrified. The boy understood that the skill could not have appeared by itself. He looked back at the slippers he had thrown away a short time ago. An unwanted thought had occurred to him, but he still wanted to make sure. The boy reached for his slippers and thought that this was a good opportunity to test this skill. The panel displayed a variety of information, from the item's performance and magic power to effects. At the top, the name Holy Slipper and the caption Holy Walk were displayed. The young man saw that everything was happening in reality. The panel showed 2 rows of slots, and the number of boosts matched the number of times he boosted. He looked more closely and noticed that after the light attribute was strengthened, an effect called Holy Walk appeared. Arito didn't know what it was. Leela appeared behind her brother. She squatted down and asked him what he was doing. The boy was so deep in thought that he almost automatically told him that he was mastering the skill of analysis, but he managed to catch himself and stopped. He shuddered, closed the panel and turned around abruptly. Then he asked his sister what she was doing there. she replied that he had disappeared somewhere, so she went to look for him. Arito understood everything, apologized, and thanked her. Leela simply beamed and smiled radiantly. The boy decided to check the analysis later. The boys joined hands and went home. There, according to the little girl, they would eat stewed meat, which both brother and sister were very happy about. Near the window into the room, part of the crown of a nearby tree was visible. The day was coming to an end. Arito sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled, wiping his head dry with a towel. He was finally alone, and could now figure it all out. He opened the panel. On it he was most interested in the holy slippers, the lack of a part of HP, and what the effect of the holy walk was. A system window appeared, stating that wearing the holy walk would remove the curse and restore strength while walking. The protagonist, dumbfounded, repeated what he had read a moment ago. The boy looked with delight at the slipper he took in his hands. This was amazing news for him, because this restoration could help in a difficult moment. He had an idea that it was possible to fill another slot. Arito started moving around the panel. It said that one row could only have one attribute, so there was no choice. The guy looked at the screen with a smile and performed the final action with the boost. A new emblem appeared on the panel with the caption, "Foot Massage." He thought that now when wearing it, HP is restored, so it became more practical. The guy also noticed that the efficiency became higher, but the strength and magic did not change. His little sister was sleeping next to him. The boy laughed. It was a good find for him. He looked at the other slipper that was lying in front of him and remembered that the effects were supposed to change depending on the attribute. He decided to check, picked up another slipper, and opened the panel that displayed skills and effects. A system window appeared about what the Deathwalk was. It notified that once a person puts on these slippers, they will be impossible to take off, and damage will be inflicted while walking. The guy realized that this was the effect of the curse. Arito looked at his attribute with a certain delight, as if the danger did not frighten him, but attracted him. He wondered what would happen if he put on both slippers. The young man decided that it would be too dangerous. He did not test his idea, got out of bed, put the slipper in the drawer, and thought about how glad he was that he had the analysis. He blew out the candle that stood on the table and began to go to bed. Covering himself with a blanket, he thought how lucky he was to have this skill. Arito lay down on the bed next to his sister and began to fall asleep, realizing that he still had to gain knowledge and experience. 5 years passed, spring came. In the meadow, the wind swayed the flowers and drove the leaves against the cloudy sky. The young man was already 15 years old and was about to leave the village that day. There was a smile on his face, as if he was not afraid. He had to leave the village where he was born and raised. The protagonist opened the door. Light poured into the room through the crack. He was preparing to go to the city for training. He said goodbye to his parents already on the street. They gave him parting words. His mother asked him to take care of himself, and his father, not to screw up. The young man looked at his family with a smile and promised to do his best. Between the father and mother stood an old man with a cane. The difference in height between the people and the gnome was very noticeable. Uncle Tom called the boy and asked him to take something. He wanted to give a parting gift and told her to use it wisely. In Arito's hands was a small bag, something jingled inside. He looked at it, only guessing what might be inside. The elder added that there was not much money there, but it would be enough to live for about a week in the city. He, like the boy's parents, was rooting for him. The hero looked at the master with wide-open eyes and could not find words from surprise. He thanked everyone and promised not only to succeed, but also to return. Arito raised his hand and waved goodbye to them, and with a smile, he set off on his way. He took the first step towards his adventures, leaving behind his parents, Uncle Tom, and the villagers, against the backdrop of which rose the pine forest. If you count all 4 lives the guy has lived, he has lived for 135 years, and this is the first time someone has been so kind to him. The hero clenched his fists. He was ready to do everything possible to fulfill his dream and to live up to the expectations of his loved ones. The young man walked through the forest and thought that even though he had decided to leave, he would still miss everyone. He looked very depressed. However, he realized with regret that sooner or later he would leave this village anyway. Arito chuckled when he thought of Uncle Tom. He never thought that the dwarf would be at such a low level, since his experience in enhancing items was almost non-existent. Tom had very few recipes for enhancing, and all of them were intended for household appliances, and the young man's only opponent was a raccoon. So the guy, finally, went to town. His backpack contained weapons, armor, and money. In addition, he also invested his points in HP and MP. This was displayed on the panel. The hero closed the screen and continued on his way. He looked dejected. The only thing he regretted was that he couldn't see his sister goodbye. On both sides, rows of coniferous trees grew. A flock of birds flew past their very tops. The boy stopped. In front of him was a city full of cute wooden houses. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with relief and exhaled, having managed to get here before sunset. Arito weighed the bag in his hand. He didn't want to spend the night in the field, but he didn't want to spend money either. The protagonist turned around and noticed a resident with a horse nearby. He got the idea that he could spend the night in the stable. Suddenly, someone called out to the boy. He looked at who was calling him. In front of him was a lady in heels. He was silent and waited with apprehension for what she wanted from him. A fair-haired girl in an elegant dress and a hairpin asked if anything was bothering the young man. The lady repeated her question. She wanted to know if he had any concerns. She smiled, crossed her arms over her chest and looked at him, waiting for an answer. Arito asked in fear if she was really talking to him as the stranger's expression changed. She looked at the guy carefully, as if she saw something in him that she did not expect to see. The girl got angry and said that he had already been contacted. She tried to understand how late she was. The young man winced. He had no idea what they were talking about. The lady's eyes clouded over. She wondered what she should do then. The guy liked the girl, but she seemed strange to him. The stranger continued that she had only one thing left to give him. It was the only thing she could do, and that no one else would do. Arito didn't understand what this meant, but the girl was determined. She took the hero by the hand and told him to follow her, since they couldn't do it here. The boy didn't have time to come to his senses and ask her to wait, as she forcefully dragged him along with her. He was frightened by the girl's behavior and tried to get her to answer where they were going. Arito was surprised when the lady answered that they were heading to the hotel, since he himself had no immediate plans to go there. The lady gave the counterworker his money, and she wished them a good rest in the best room. The boy was horrified because he did not even notice when she took it. The door creaked, and in the middle of the room stood a double bed. The young man looked at his bag of money with tears in his eyes. He thought that it would be better in the stable, because there was only one bed in the room. However, the girl seemed to be quite happy with everything. The protagonist was stunned when the stranger turned out to be naked and told him to do the same. He did not understand why she did this. She was going to do what she had to do. Arito lay on the bed and covered his eyes with his hands, embarrassed to look at the girl. The lady said that she had already endowed him with chaos, and firmly grabbed him by the shoulder. Then she leaned over the young man. To break the rule, she needed a physical connection. The girl said that she wanted to give him the knowledge of this world, but only that which their predecessors had discovered. She assured him that with all 7 attributes, he would be able to find all known improvements. She knew that the best night of his life would disappear from memory like smoke, which would most likely be offensive. She had never done this before, so she asked him to be gentle with her. Sunlight was shining through the uncurtained windows. The main character was sleeping, but something woke him up and he sneezed. Arito got out of bed. He was terribly cold, and he couldn't understand where his clothes had gone. He started to get dressed and was surprised to find himself in a hotel, and in such a large room. He checked his money bag, of which there was not much left. He raised his hand to his face and lamented how he could do this and spent the money he had received from his loved ones. Suddenly, a strange new feeling came over him. While the guy was sleeping, he should have gotten a lot more points than he had. He thought that if the magical increase in points or skills was repeated. He opened the panel and began to search, but the scheme of his powers remained the same. The boy observed that the status was the same. The stats were still low, and the points had not increased. He did not give up hope and decided to test his skills. Perhaps a new one had appeared. The next moment he froze, and looked at the panel with his mouth open. Illustrations of improvements appeared on it. Now the guy could turn to recipes for upgrading items at any time. On the screen, the hero found quite a few recipes. It was a skill he had never heard of, which seemed suspicious to Arito. He looked back. The day before, the young man had thought about improving his weapon and decided to try. The boy left the sword, leaning it against the edge of the bed. He remembered receiving it as a gift from a wandering traveler of the church to protect himself from monsters if they attacked. However, the man himself advised him to run away. The traveler still strongly recommended using the sword when it was really needed. Then he corrected himself, remembering that Arito was much older than his peers and would understand everything. The word old man seemed to hit the boy in the chest. The protagonist was grateful. but wondered whether such a statement was unnecessary. Throwing away his memories, the young man studied the indicators on the panel. He saw that the sword had 27 HP and was very battered. Arito knew that HP was the same value as a person's status, so if it reached 0, the item would break. The boy studied the panel, realizing that the item's efficiency indicator appeared when used as intended. The screen also displayed the strength or durability indicator, where increasing strength increases HP accordingly. The last thing left was magical power, namely the indicator of magical power and magic resistance. The sword had 2 slots. The boy said that this was the basics of the basics, and that the fire attribute could be added, which would improve performance. Arito clenched his fist and raised it above his head, shouting a battle cry. He wanted to put the explanation aside and try to carry out his plan. The sword's status changed, and he discovered a new effect. It was possible to try the fire strike, a technique of slashing sword strikes with fire. However, the boy understood that since the level was low, the effect would be weak. He raised his hand over the plate on the panel, confirming the action, and froze, thinking it over carefully. Even if he improved the sword with 4 attributes, it would only be a small increase in effectiveness in 2 slots. He didn't know if there would be room for romance. Like fire and water, darkness and light in conflict, if they are combined, the effectiveness will drop. All that was left was chaos, but the boy knew nothing about it since neither humans nor non-humans can control it. The young man was confused. He decided to try the illustration of improvements in practice, because the required points for improvement are quite high. For improvements he gets points, like experience, so he swiped his finger across the panel and pressed the affirmative bar, deciding to do it. The changes on the screen made Arito angry, because his status had been lowered. A new effect has appeared, a self-destructing sword. The hero realized that the remaining HP of the item was used to deal incredible damage and the sword was shattered into pieces. He could use it as a normal sword, but the characteristics were like a wooden stick. The guy looked at the sword and thought that chaos was completely useless. However, he almost immediately dismissed this thought, suggesting that it would be worth combining it with another attribute. He pressed a few more buttons on the panel, deciding to take a chance. The information on the screen changed. Arito was pleased to note that all the indicators had increased, which was even better than the combination of the 2 fires. The boy began to analyze that the chaos attribute was only effective when fully charged and combined with other attributes. He raised the sword into the air and said that it was a good idea to combine it with fire, but he wanted to make it even stronger. A new idea came to mind, to strengthen with light or darkness. The young man decided to first remove the fire and then add darkness. Having pressed the necessary plates on the panel, he again confirmed his actions with consent. The sword in Arito's hands glowed, and he froze in anticipation of the transformation. The weapon with a hissing sound was transformed. Its appearance was very surprising, monograms on the handle and an unusually shaped tip. He felt that the sword was emitting an ominous aura. Using the appraisal skill, he realized that the sword had become magical. A rank was quite strong. Arito noticed that the magic power had risen to C rank, and the poison strike should be a good effect. Considering his mana, the boy could only use it once. It was amazing for the boy. He was no longer afraid of the monsters he might encounter, because as long as he had this sword, even with low stats, it would be possible to destroy them all. A simple wound could be considered a victory. The grass swayed in the wind. A young man stood in the forest, holding a sword in his hands. He was about to try it out for the first time in his life. There was a huge boulder in the middle of the clearing. Arito adjusted his grip on the sword's hilt. He knew that the sword's effectiveness was at least A rank, and it should be able to cut through rocks with ease. He thought it would work, so he sped up, his boots scraping the ground. Then he raised his sword from his shoulder and threw it forward with all his might, smashing it straight into a boulder lying in the forest thicket. The boy was grinding his teeth, and his hands were shaking. He groaned in pain and shook his hands in the air to make it go away faster. It seemed to him that he had done almost no damage, and it did not look like a cut at all, but there was no crack on the boulder. Arito was puzzled as to why this happened. He thought that perhaps his status was too low. He began to get nervous and turned his head around, trying to find a way out. Then he noticed his armor and decided to strengthen it. It wasn't even armor, but a lid from a saucepan, which he also received as a gift. Uncle Tom strictly forbade him from fighting and told him that the first thing he had to think about when monsters attacked was to escape. He also advised him to throw a lid at them if necessary. Arito knew that if he reinforced it with earth, the object would become stronger. But it was just a pot lid with a little stat boost, and he couldn't match one slot with chaos. He decided to use the wind, and the lid lit up. The panel displayed the name Flying Stormcap. It seemed strange to the guy. Also, the effect of Flight Plus appeared. It allowed to throw the object further and hit the target accurately. The boy took a risk and threw the lid. She flew in such a trajectory that she cut the pear off the tree. Arito looked at this with fascination and admiration. He squatted down and reached for the lid. The result was much more useful than the protagonist initially thought. He decided that the wind was just right for the lid. Uncle Tom's motto about quitting and controlling became reality. Then he put away his sword. The enhancement was complete. He understood that, although weak, monsters would appear from now on, so he should be more careful. A flock of birds was flying in the sky. A girl named Qualis was being scolded in the forest by someone, saying that what she had done was vile and that she should be ashamed. She turned to Sira and asked him not to yell at her. She felt she had no other choice, since the only way to convey something to the boy was through direct physical contact. Sira was horrified by this statement. The third girl wondered if it would cause a lot of problems if one of the three goddesses lost her virginity. Qualis didn't think it would affect her much. Maybe she just wouldn't be able to return to her original form. Two goddesses insisted that this was too serious, while the third believed that it would be a good idea to end life with the world in this form. Sira thought it was too much, because that girl created a new skill for the guy and gave it to him. In her opinion, it was cheating. The goddess objected that she had created it for a master who had passed her tests 100 years ago, and after his death the skill had returned, but she had no need for it at all. Hearing this answer, the girl turned to Dark. She tried to understand why she had given up her analytical abilities. The third goddess didn't feel the difference, because it was more important to her that Arito lived a happy life, and after his death, this skill would return. She was fishing while the girls were arguing about Dark talking about the guy as if he were her child and her having a strong maternal instinct. It seemed to her that Sira-chan thought that she hadn't given her anything worthwhile. The goddess was indignant, and Dark believed that although they did not give people any special advantages, it was worth asking what he wanted. Sira cried. She knew that glasses were always in short supply, but the attribute of light was the least valuable because it was the most common. There were no more advantages to give, but she wanted to help the hero a little until he became a master of item enhancement. She was determined to do so, and Dark said goodbye. The goddess asked her what she was going to be. She took the stick in her hands and began to twirl it. She threw her sword over her shoulder and replied that she would be an adventurer. In this form she was weaker, but because of that she had more fun. Sarah understood her and was happy, and then asked what Qualis thought about it. She replied that she wanted to be an alchemist. Goddess Sira was delighted to hear that an alchemist creates items and potions. When an adventurer uses them, they are also linked to enhancing the items. The girls did not wait for her to finish her story, said goodbye and left, leaving her alone with her thoughts about Arito. She was left alone in the forest, and her cries that it was unfair were heard only by the birds. Some girl turned around quickly. A huge snake was crawling towards her, hissing. The girl put her leg aside and was about to jump. In flight, she kicked the snake and landed gently. Then she touched the ground and, feeling something, turned her gaze into the thicket of the forest. She straightened up to her full height and became alert. A large monster's foot landed on the ground very close by. The monster felled trees and walked away with a roar. His appearance was terrifying. A small fish was splashing in the river. Arito was walking through the forest and pushed aside a small branch with his hand. It has been 3 days since he left the city. The sun was gradually setting and the boy hoped that he would make it before nightfall. Suddenly, he heard a sound. The guy turned around in fear, not understanding what kind of earthquake it was. These couldn't have been someone's footsteps, since large monsters live here. If the monster is weak, the young man will easily deal with it. Here an animal jumped out onto the road. It was a rabbit. And not just one. The boy was surprised that there was a whole group of them, because usually this is a rare occurrence. It occurred to him that they didn't even pay attention to the man and seemed to be running away from someone. A flock of birds soared into the sky from the treetops. A loud roar was heard. The sound was getting closer. Someone was approaching quickly, and it was huge. With a loud scream, a girl appeared in front of Arito. She was crying. The guy asked her in a daze how she was doing. The girl looked at the traveler silently, and then she jumped right on him, knocking him down. She screamed with joy because it was her brother. She threw him to the ground and burst into tears, while the young man tried to calm her down. Leela inherited the blood of the Great Blue Wolf, a member of one of the oldest tribes of werewolves. Once upon a time, Arito was only 3 years old playing at home. His mother found a werewolf man with a child on the outskirts of the village, but his wounds were too severe and he passed away 3 days later. He entrusted his child to them, and they accepted him into their family. This is the story of Leela. The protagonist wanted to know what Leela was doing there. She replied that her brother had left the village and she decided to follow him. The girl was despondent. She was sure that Arito's brother would not have taken her with him, so she decided to leave without telling anyone. The guy understood why she had not seen him off then. The young man exhaled. He couldn't believe his ears. He stroked his sister's head. She looked at him with tears in her eyes while he said he was glad nothing happened to her. The girl beamed. Arito thought she was angry because he left, and besides, he was glad to see her. Suddenly, something appeared behind him. A huge monster appeared. The guys were very scared and could not understand what it was. The monster had huge teeth and protruding fangs. A hand of incredible size began to cut down trees. Through analysis, the boy discerned the characteristics of the monster. He was very surprised that a hunchbacked ogre, a B-rank monster, appeared before him. The boy didn't have time to figure out what a monster of such rank was doing here. His main task was to protect Leela. He took out his sword and grinned menacingly. The system window notified about the attribute bonus, namely, a 40% increase in strength. Although the monster was a B rank, it had a magic sword. The monster was furious, and with a wild roar raised his hand over the boys, to strike with all his might. Arito realized with regret that it looked like he wouldn't get out alive. However, in his entire threefold life, he never gave up, so he grabbed his pot lid with a grin, and an attribute bonus was added to it. It was 20% to the efficiency. The ogre hit the ground, and the brother and sister were thrown back. The boy stopped with his feet, pushing against the ground. A notification came that he could use the shield 5 more times. Another option occurred to Arito because even if they tried to run, at this distance the monster would catch up with them. The monster opened its mouth and roared. The boy told his sister to stay put, and she asked him what he was going to do. Her brother ran straight at the ogre, drawing his sword along the way because he wanted to destroy it. He used the petrification effect, and the monster froze. Arito decided to use the self-destruct effect. He knew he had only one try and that he could do it. He grabbed his shield after his sword. Then he jumped and struck with each of his weapons in turn. And finally, he used the self-destruct effect, raising his unique sword up. He struck, and there was a blinding flash. Leela turned away, unable to bear such a bright light. Then there was a massive explosion that could be seen from afar. The gods have given this world several blessings, one of which is the HP life system. Until your HP reaches 0, you will feel pain or numbness, but you will not lose your life. If your HP reaches 0, your life will end. You can even die from a simple fall. HP can be in humans, demi-humans, monsters, demons, armor and weapons, but the system does not affect plants, animals, stones, and so on. This is the life system in their world. Arito fell to the ground, hitting his back. He exhaled, was all scratched, and knew that it was very dangerous. HP remained 7 out of 150. Alarmed, Leela ran to her brother. He squinted in pain, but the first thing he asked was if she was okay. Leela replied that she was not hurt. The guy was interested to see how much damage he had done to the ogre. The monster let out a quiet roar. Its HP was 0, and there was a huge hole in its belly. The protagonist noticed that the monster had no HP left. It looked at him with empty eyes. However, the boy himself had run out of mana. He sent his sister to finish off the ogre and Leela immediately obeyed him. The girl performed her signature kick and landed. Then she turned around and used freeze. Arito's little sister delivered the decisive blow to the monster's jaw, and the boy rejoiced at her success, watching the battle scene with delight. The ogre fell with a crash, unconscious, even before the girl had time to land. Leela descended to the ground and assumed a warlike pose. Brother could see all of her characteristics in reality with his skill. The girl ran up to him, and they high-fived each other, as they were so happy that they had succeeded. Suddenly the boys noticed a bright glare near the ogre. It was some kind of ball hovering in the air and shining. The young man realized that it was for the victory over the monster that they had received the item and told Leela to take it. She immediately agreed, ran after it, and soon the glare was in her possession. Then, instead of it, a bottle of ogre water appeared in her hands. Arito saw that it had a darkness attribute and a stomach curse effect. The girl, who did not have such information, offered her brother to try it, which confused him. He immediately explained to her that it was a liquid that accumulated in the ogre's hump, and if you drank it, you would get stomach pains and be cursed. Leel's desire to try it disappeared instantly. The boys were sitting at the edge of the forest. The girl was using the skill of weak healing to relieve the pain in her brother's back. He was convinced that his sister had not told her mom and dad that she was leaving, thus she surprised him by doing the exact opposite. Her parents supported her and said that they were very happy to hear this, because the girl was really very sad that her brother was leaving. Since mom and dad agreed with this decision, Arito decided that there was nothing he could do, so he suggested that his sister go further with him, and she happily agreed. They walked arm in arm in the forest thicket, and the girl sang songs of happiness that she was finally with her brother. The goddess hid behind one of the trees and watched the boys. She was confident that he would achieve what he wanted. The goddess had been thinking about helping him even before she gave him the skill. But the young man turned out to be stronger than she expected. Besides, she saw that he had a girlfriend and everything was fine. She felt sad that she couldn't follow him secretly because Sira would scold her for being mean. However, she was only going to kill the monsters that would get in her way. She didn't think that it would be favoritism. The evening sunset gave way to night. The moon and stars appeared in the sky. Arito and Leel reached the city without encountering a single monster. The boy considered themselves very lucky. His sister was hungry. Her brother, opening the door of some establishment, said that they had indeed had a long journey and it wouldn't hurt to have something to eat. There were a lot of people in the tavern. Some were just drinking, and some were ordering food for themselves. The waitress was bringing dishes to the tables, and the second worker was standing behind the counter. A woman with a short haircut greeted them and, having not seen the boys before, assumed they were not from around here. She asked what they would like to order. The boy put some coins on the table, asking them to bring something for both of them, as well as milk and water. He twirled another coin in his hands, suggesting that they talk later, as he would really like to hear stories. The waitress grinned at the young man's resourcefulness. They came to an agreement. The woman promised to tell him everything he wanted, and in the meantime she would bring them food. She warned that their establishment was a bit noisy. A group of people were sitting in the distance. They were tipsy and acting rudely, but Arito had nothing to fear, because soon they would pass out and go silent from such a quantity of alcohol. The old man at the next table laughed. He thought it was better to leave them alone. That group was in a great mood. Maybe they made a lot of money. The old man said that they were adventurers from Zexheim, and that they had recently sold recovery potions at exorbitant prices. The boy asked if they had been attacked by demons or if there had been a plague. In fact, the mayor's daughter fell under a strange spell. The mayor sent his man to Zexheim 3 days ago to find a way to cure her, but he still hasn't returned, and the lady's HP has started to drop sharply. The boy was thinking that it would have taken him 2 days on horseback to get there, sort out his business, and return. His thoughts were interrupted by the waitress who brought the order. She apologized for the long wait. The young man was ready to eat everything that was on the table. The old man sitting next to him was about to leave. Arito knew that the dishes would be more expensive and was afraid that he would not have enough money, but the waitress wanted to apologize for the noise in the establishment. She asked what he wanted to know. She sat down in the old man's place at the next table and hoped that the topic of conversation would not be noisy drunks. The protagonist stated that they were heading to Zexheim, where he wanted to become an item enhancement master. The lady replied that it was a city of adventurers, and there were many forges, as well as shops selling weapons, armor, and so on. But she had also heard about workshops for enhancing items. He thanked her and asked if there were any rumors in the city. The woman thought about it and remembered hearing that a new dungeon or something like that had recently been discovered. Arito was delighted by what he heard. The waitress said that they were in the mountains, not far from the city, and the brave souls who entered there never returned, and the Seekers Guild was currently recruiting a team. She didn't know the size of the dungeon because the curse on the mayor's daughter meant they couldn't afford to worry about it. Her story was interrupted by rowdy guests who had run out of drink. They were shouting for more. The woman began to rise from the table, and the boy handed her the coins, thanking her for the conversation, although the lady considered it insignificant. It was important to the guy. The girl's screams wouldn't stop, so he volunteered to help the waitress to repay her for treating them. The company was thanked for waiting and drinks were brought. They were very happy about this and clinked glasses, continuing their meeting in the same spirit. After the first sip, the men concluded that this alcohol was much better than the previous one. The adventurer advised them not to hurry and said that now they would definitely be silent. Leela was surprised and asked why he was sure of this. The men began to feel sleepy, and the guy was happy about it, saying that he had told his sister about it. He said that that company would get drunk and fall asleep, which is what happened. The young man thought that the fire attribute had increased the effectiveness, that is, the taste and strength of the alcohol, but that tomorrow morning there would be a severe hangover, which would serve as their punishment for the noise. The young man admitted that it might have been a waste of points, but now they could eat in peace. When all the dishes were eaten, the boys thanked the workers. The door opened. They were wished a good journey. It was delicious. Now they had to take a bath. However, Arito had one more thing to do. Night had fallen, but he still needed time to meet with the mayor. There was a candle burning outside the window. There was a very fat man lying in the bed and sobbing. The sky was overcast. Near the fortress, which partly resembled ruins, sounds of pursuit could be heard. The girl in heels seemed to be escaping from someone's pursuit. She was surrounded by black dust and didn't know where to escape from it. The elegant metal gates opened. Arito and Leela stood in front of a luxurious, rich house. This was the mayor's mansion. The boys were amazed at how huge this house was. The younger sister admitted that she was a little scared, and the brother assured her that everything was fine. He just needed to ask a few questions. The young man knocked on the door, saying that he was a traveler and apologized for disturbing us. He took some ogre water with him with the effect of stomach curse and hoped that this bottle would help. The protagonist used the illustration skill and learned that ogre water can be taken as a way to remove curses by enhancing it with the attribute of light. Not against all curses, but it will work on some. However, the type of curse was not made public, and no matter how many people the brother and sister asked, no one knew. The butler invited them inside the mansion. In order to find out if the ogre's water would help, they would first need to know the type of curse. They sat on the couch waiting, and Arito couldn't believe that the mayor had let in the first teenager he met who said he might be able to help with the curse. He wondered if they were really that desperate. The doors swung open, and a man stood in front of them. It was Mayor Thomas, who wanted to know which of the boys could lift the curse on his daughter, and then immediately burst into tears, embarrassing the newly arrived guests. The boy repeated his words, which made the old man start crying uncontrollably, grabbed his hand. He understood that perhaps this was just an empty hope because he was a very young guy, but the mayor decided to believe him, and ordered him to break the curse. The old man led the guest into his daughter's room, and, although the young man resisted, he did not listen to him at all. The mayor promised a worthy reward if Arito helped, although he wanted to ask something else. Suddenly, the man became serious and warned that his daughter's spell must remain a secret, otherwise he would spend a fortune hiring S-rank hunters to eliminate those he told. The boy did not argue and said that he understood. He also realized that he shouldn't have come and meddle in something that wasn't his business, but the old man was adamant, and kept saying that they didn't have much time. The three of them stopped in the corridor opposite the girl's room. The mayor opened the door, and the travelers looked inside. There was only one candle burning in the room, and nothing could be seen. The boy couldn't use the analysis because it was too dark. However, he could still discern the outline of a silhouette on the bed. He heard some sounds from the depths of the room, and became confused. The young man assumed it was his breath. The mayor said that she was getting worse every day, and reminded him that he must not talk about the curse and what his daughter looked like. Arito swallowed nervously and stepped into the room. Leela grabbed the hem of his robe. The adventurer was about to pull down the canopy over the bed. In front of them lay a woman who was so huge that she took up the entire bed. The guy looked at her swollen hands and face while she snored. He realized that she had a curse of expansion, where a person would gain weight even if they didn't eat. It didn't hurt, but the person couldn't move anymore, and their HP would decrease every day, so death would be long and painful. The mayor hurried the main character to remove the curse, and 1,000 thoughts swarmed in the guy's head, because without an A-rank mage it was impossible to do. Even if he strengthened the ogre's water, it was beyond his control. The old man began to suspect that the young man would not be able to do this, while he frantically calculated his moves, thinking up what to answer him. Suddenly, he heard the girl start crying and stuttering, "Help." He froze. Arito asked Mr. Thomas and Leela to leave so he could concentrate. The mayor trusted him and asked him to save Melina, and then left the room, closing the door behind him. The main character was not sure of his actions. However, he had a premonition that he was able to turn an ordinary copper sword into a magical one, so he took a risk and pressed the necessary plates on the panel. He braced himself and focused all his strength on the flask of ogre water that floated between his hands, glowing. The incredible happened. The ogre's water turned into holy water. Its attributes were light and chaos, and the effect was purification ++s. Arito was shocked by his success, because he really did it, and now he could lift the curse from Lady Milena. All that was left was for her to drink it. He opened the bottle and poured the contents into her mouth. Her body glowed so brightly that the boy had to cover his eyes with his hand. Right outside the door stood Mayor Thomas and Leela, who were very worried. Then the door opened slightly. Arito's head appeared from the crack. He called the mayor and said that he had finished. The mayor looked very worried. Mr. Thomas then learned from the young man that the curse had been lifted. He burst into the room, shouting his daughter's name as he went. She was crying, but she could already speak. Milena's father looked at her with tears in his eyes and could not believe that everything was really over. The gentleman was very happy and kept hugging his daughter. Leela and Arito watched the happy family in silence. The girl praised her brother, saying that he was great. However, she did not understand how he managed to lift the curse. He replied that he was mostly just lucky. They passed by a room where there were empty beds. The girl couldn't resist and climbed into bed with her feet up. She was telling how soft it was there when the mayor came up. Her brother was about to reprimand her, but the gentleman was not angry. He just laughed and said that everything was fine. The butler came into the room with a bag in his hands. Mr. Thomas said that they should rest and have fun today because they saved his daughter's life. Then he called out to Arito again, who turned around. The mayor was about to present the boy with a well-deserved reward. There were 5 million gillies in the bag. He didn't want the boys to have trouble sleeping because of the weight, so he decided to reward them now. The guy wanted to interrupt him, but he continued that this was the only thing he could give now, so he asked them not to argue and take it. The young man thanked the old man and accepted his reward, taking the bag from him. Mr. Thomas said he should be the one saying thanks. He apologized for taking so long and said goodnight. There was an open bag filled with coins lying on the floor. The boys were mesmerized by the wealth they had just acquired. They couldn't believe it. Arito warned his sister that before they spent money, they needed to think about how they would live in Zexheim. Leela wondered if he would be upgrading items. Her brother answered yes, but first he planned to get a job to gain experience. The young man recalled the words of the waitress, who told him that there were many forges in this city where they improved items and there were several vacancies. He found several interesting forges, but there was one obstacle. If someone saw his status with the appraisal skill and his skills, he would definitely get into big trouble, so he would like to hide it somehow. The girl began to worry if everything was okay with her brother and if he was tired, and then she suggested that he take a bath. Arito agreed that a lot had happened today and said that she needed to learn to wash herself. She was upset, so her brother made concessions. There was a barrel and a small bench next to the bathtub. He was soaping the girl's hair and ears. He suggested that his sister start going to school when they went to Zexheim. There was a school there that trained adventurers. He asked if she was interested. The girl thought about it. The young man explained that she was different from him because she had good physical indicators and with proper training she could become an SE rank adventurer, which is the dream of many. He told her that she could go to school, but she didn't have to force herself to be an adventurer. Schooling wasn't limited to that. Leela didn't understand what that meant. The brother replied that they taught not only how to become adventurers, but also what you need to know when you go out into the world. He said from his own experience that there was nothing wrong with her choosing her own path. The girl thought for a moment. There were soap bubbles flying in the bathroom. She had come up with something. Then she stood up and exclaimed that Leela would become an adventurer. Arito said that the girl would wash herself. The water was leaking out through the drain. A flock of birds flew across the sky. The sun's rays pierced the coniferous forest. The boys said goodbye to Mr. Thomas and thanked him for everything. They were sorry that he was missing breakfast. However, the mayor assured them that everything was fine and he was looking forward to the next meeting with them. The children waved to the master and the butler, who stood at the gate and watched them go. Leela asked how far it was from here to the next town. The journey took 2 days. The boys were given talismans to protect themselves from monsters, which was very generous in the opinion of the main character. The talismans scared away monsters equal to the owner's level and below, but did not affect monsters of danger level A and above. Arito said that it had 2 weak stats and wouldn't be of any use, so he wanted to give it to his sister. But he thought that it would be possible to strengthen the talisman with the attribute of darkness and get a stat-hiding talisman. He thought it would be too unnatural. White squares will be too strange, and it will, on the contrary, attract even more attention. There was only one attribute left that he could rely on, so he filled one slot with chaos. Leela watched her brother with interest. He tried to understand that darkness and chaos should strengthen the talisman. Suddenly, the concealment effect changed to disguise, and now he could change the status at will. He changed the status so that there would be no noise when evaluating. He was reasoning that a skill rank of B would be very helpful in getting a job, when Leela suddenly grabbed his hand. She asked to look ahead. They had views of the mountains, and something in the distance caught their eye. This was Zexheim, the city of adventurers. That was where their path lay. At the western gate to Zexheim stood the goddess with a scepter. She wore delicate sandals. She finally reached the city and was glad that Arito had not arrived here yet. She was worried about where she and Leela were now. The boys arrived in the city of adventurers, and from the very first moments they were met by an amazing atmosphere. The city turned out to be truly beautiful. The streets were crowded, people were hurrying about their business. The brother and sister were busy with many things to do, so they decided to go to the Montenio Bank to solve important issues. As soon as they entered the premises, a consultant approached them and said hello, offering to help. Arito decided to put money into his account. The bank consultant said it was a deposit. The boy was asked if he had a credit card. Arito replied that he had recently arrived in the city and did not understand banking well. The bank employee noted that the guys were probably not yet familiar with the unique system that was in place in their city. Then the consultant called Samantha, one of his colleagues who understood the system best. The girl approached the guys with a friendly smile and introduced herself, establishing a warm and trusting contact with them. She promised to explain the features of the unique system operating in the city. Arito is happy to meet Samantha. He was surprised because she is short. The girl explained that she is a dwarf and she is 24 years old, after which she invited the guys to go with her. Samantha began to explain to Arito and Leela about opening a bank account. First, the girl asked how much money they needed to deposit, noting that small amounts were also accepted. Arito said that the bag contained 5 million gi, a significant amount of local currency. Samantha smiled and noted that it was not the kind of money a child would carry around. The girl offered to deposit the amount into the account, offering the guys to receive 1 year of silver concierge service, access to free financial consultation, 3 times a year, help in finding housing, and signing a lease. In the Renobe, Samantha checked if the coins were real. Arito agreed to put up all his money and asked the gnome to help send Leela's little sister to school. Samantha agreed to help. The girl thanked the boy for his trust, saying that before he deposited the money, she would first tell him about the unique system. It turned out that the coins were practically not used, as there was a card called Gillica. Money is transferred to a card with identity verification, accessible only to the owner. With your permission, loved ones can use this card or get additional cards with a joint account. Samantha gave Arito the card, asking him to touch it with his fingers. The registration was complete. The money had already been processed and loaded onto the card. The boy asked Samantha if it was possible to improve the Gillica. She replied that all the slots were blocked and that when closing the account, the card had to be returned in its current state. The girl was interested in whether anyone had improved the Gillica. Arito didn't find any valuable improvements. The map becomes lighter with wind, heavier with earth, monitors health with water, and the light changes color. Maybe look at the illustrations. Samantha promised to find housing for her brother and sister. They will go to look at the options tomorrow morning. The meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m. The girl thanked Arito and Leela for their time. Then the boys went to lunch, because the money was safe. Suddenly, Leela noticed someone. The strangers are arguing, and it's interesting to find out what exactly happened. Although the team seems well balanced, they are clearly having problems. The stranger curiously asked why the boys decided to leave. Arito politely noted that he did not want to interfere with the entrance to the bank, and asked how he could help. The stranger introduced herself as Sarah, apologized for the suddenness, and asked him to pretend that they knew each other. The stranger said that she had registered as an adventurer yesterday. Now the B-rank team wanted her to join their ranks. The boy listened carefully and understood what Sarah meant. Arito doubted her experience, since a B-rank team could find someone more experienced. Her attributes are medium healing, paralysis defense, detoxification, holy arrow, and purification. The boy looked at Sierra carefully. He noticed that there was something wrong with her status. The status seemed a little cloudy and unusual. This immediately caught his attention and raised questions. Arito remembered that he and his sister had not eaten yet. He noted that it was time to take a lunch break. The boy apologized to Sarah. After that, the boys began to get ready to set off. At that moment, the stranger offered to join them, as she herself was going to have lunch nearby. Sarah said that if Arito wanted to become an item enhancement master, she would be willing to be his first client. Arito thanked her for her trust. The boy thought that he shouldn't let his guard down even if Sierra was beautiful. Although she didn't seem like a bad person, he still had to be careful. Arito noticed the Holy Dragon staff with healing, blessing, curse protection, and powerful breath. Surprised by the uniqueness of the item, he thought about the mysterious Sierra. Arito said that the staff was incredible and became curious. Sierra explained that it was a family heirloom, but she did not know the details of its history. The boy admitted that he had not known how important the staff was to her, and wondered if the stranger was hiding her true origins, studying society under the guise of an adventurer. Arito wondered if Sarah was a bad person with bad intentions. Maybe she had stolen the staff. He began to have doubts about the stranger. At that moment, Leela said something to her brother. The little sister reported that her brother had agreed to the proposal. Leela was happy for Sarah. The stranger thanked Arito for being understanding. At the same time, Arito had no idea what they were talking about. Sierra said that then a bigger room was needed. Leela replied that a small one was enough for her and that everyone could live together. Sierra countered that at her age it was inconvenient. Arito asked the girls what they were talking about. Sierra's story, since he had already agreed. The stranger was happy to be a part of their life together. At that moment, Arito remembered the story about Sierra and thought about what he had heard. Leela liked the taste of the food. Arito apologized to the stranger for the fact that she would have to look after his sister. He understood that it could cause inconvenience. In response, the stranger said that she did not mind and was ready to help. The little sister wished good luck to her brother. At this time, Sarah promised the boy that she would take care of his sister. The adventurer expressed gratitude to his new acquaintance. After that, he went about his business. Arito thought about Sierra. She paid for the boys with a black card, the rarest, and her staff was extraordinary. The boy could not understand who this mysterious girl was. The shy Leela liked Sierra. Maybe she really is a good person. Arito decided to leave it aside and focus on his own affairs. The adventurer went looking for a job. The employer noted the boy's enthusiasm but said that it was not enough. He suggested that Arito learn to create objects, explaining that he would always have time to strengthen things, but now it was time to expand his knowledge in other areas. The man suggested giving up the enhancement, because if it didn't reach S rank, each enhancement would cost skill points, without which the boy wouldn't be able to do anything. However, the worker replied that the enhancement was appreciated, but it was not as effective as other skills. Also, as a blacksmith, it was better to create items from scratch. Silence. Arito was not accepted anywhere. He is upset. With a B rank, the adventurer was confident that everything was under control, although he specialized only in improving items. However, what else can be done if the boy is already receiving refusals at the threshold? However, the whole disguise would fall apart, because Arito would definitely be hired with different blacksmith skills. Leela decided to call her brother. When the boy answered, he immediately asked his sister what exactly had happened. He was worried about her voice and wanted to understand what was going on. The little sister responded with surprise, hearing her brother's familiar voice on the phone. Arito, noticing the excitement in her voice, asked Leela to calm down. Then he carefully asked if there was anyone near her. The sister explained to her brother that it was he who asked her to act secretly. At this time, Sierra worriedly asked what exactly had happened to Leela, because the girl's behavior now seemed strange and unusual to her. The little sister called her brother just to see how he was doing. Arito replied that there were no significant results yet and apologized for making her worry. In turn, Leela supported the boy. The sister noted that he was capable of creating something incredible. He replied that he did not actually create, but only improved. In any case, it was impressive. Leela added that only her brother could do something like that. During lunch, Arito decided to play with the Gillica. He carefully studied its structure. As a result, Arito got a new skill called Bell, which significantly expanded the card's capabilities. The boy didn't fully understand how the system worked: synchronization with the database, making payments without cash, and establishing communication. However, he can now talk to Leela from a distance, which makes communication easier. The employer noted that it is necessary to know the number of slots, as well as what attributes the item has. In addition, it is important to understand what is obtained when combining attributes. Also, you cannot do without data analysis. Arito replied that blacksmiths lacked the skill of analysis unless they had it by nature. To this, the employer replied that he had never heard of a blacksmith who only did improvements in their city. The worker noted that she had not seen an improvement in S rank, and the adventurer said that he only spent points on important skills, and there were definitely at least 5 A-rank blacksmiths in the city. Arito was rejected because he was not suitable for the job. However, the fact that no one is being considered as a reinforcement is a good sign. This means that the boy has virtually no competition. An adventurer is someone who has turned an ordinary sword into a magical one, managed to hide his status, and created a powerful potion against strong curses. He has all the necessary skills and attributes. Arito decided not to take the job, expressing gratitude to Leela for her support and help. He thought about his decision carefully and realized that only he himself could make such an important choice for himself. The boy decided not to look for work as an employee, but to open his own business. At this time, the boys invited Sira to go with them to the dungeon, hoping for her company. However, the girl tried to refuse. At Montenio Bank, Samantha greeted customers with joy and friendliness. Leela, Arito, and Sarah greeted Samantha with friendliness and respect. The boy enthusiastically told her that he had a strong desire to start his own business as soon as possible. The bank's motto is to meet the needs of its clients as much as possible, providing them with quality service and support. That's why the employee agreed to help the guys. Arito was shown one expensive property in the north near the gate, with shops for adventurers, another cheaper one in the south where the newbies are, and a third one in the center with easy access, less popular. Sira is willing to pay the rent. Arito wanted the rent to be as low as possible when split 3 ways. Samantha explained that the eastern part of the city was cheaper, but there were fewer adventurers there. Samantha whispered in Arito's ear if he knew who Sarah was and where she was from, since he and his sister were going to live with her. The boy replied that he didn't, but he saw her black card and thought she was a very important person. Samantha warned Arito that living with a stranger was naive. The boy asked to tell about Sire, but Samantha did not know much about her. There were no problems with the registration and issuance of the card, despite some oddities. A few days ago, Sira made a large deposit. The bank tried to find a nobleman who matched her appearance, but they couldn't. It is still unknown which kingdom this mysterious lady comes from. She recently registered as an adventurer. Despite her recent rookie status, she has been seen in the company of an experienced and respected adventurer. This experienced adventurer is known by the nickname Lone Wolf. Arito said that Sira was harassed the first time they met. Samantha noted that the girl was scared in a strange city. However, even Leela is friendly with her, so everything is fine. Leela and Sira found a good place. The first floor is divided into 2 parts. One is the owner's shop, the other is empty. The second floor is the living room and dining room. The third is 3 empty rooms for living. Arito liked the price and location. Samantha noted that there are some slightly odd requirements in this area that may raise questions. However, she did not elaborate on what exactly these peculiarities are, leaving the details unsaid. They said the owner should be in the store. Arito apologized for the disturbance, asking the girl at the establishment if she was the owner. The owner noted that she had an unusual guest. The boy arrived sooner than the shop owner expected. Arito mentioned that he wanted to rent the shop and move in with the girls in the 3 rooms above. The owner agreed and suggested that they be good neighbors. The adventurer thanked the girl in the shop. The owner asked if Arito was going to check anything, because his eyes showed that he deserved her trust. The boy did not understand the girl. The shop owner noted that Sarah was close to Arito, meaning he definitely deserved her trust. The adventurer asked Sarah if she and the shop owner were friends. The girl replied that they were just acquaintances. The owner offered to buy the boys everything they needed for life. Sarah expressed a desire to talk to Arito alone and asked the owner not to do anything strange. She replied that she was too worried. The girl at the shop introduced herself as Qualis, an alchemist and owner of a potion shop, which immediately caught Arito's attention. He wondered if she really opened the shop herself. As a beginner, Qualis can only create cheap potions, so it takes a lot of effort to earn money. Arito noticed that her skills are really low: alchemy, fire magic, synthesis, wind magic, and appraisal. The boy noticed the strange balance of Qualis' characteristics and assumed it was due to her magical specialization. Her status was unclear. At that moment, Qualis noticed his gaze and asked what the adventurer was looking at. Arito apologized for his absent-mindedness and quickly realized that Qualis needed an item enhancement shop nearby, as it would allow her to improve the quality, effectiveness of her potions and sell them at a higher price. Qualis asked Arito to demonstrate his skills by turning a common potion into an expensive and valuable one. Arito was ready to take on one bottle. However, Qualis unexpectedly put a whole batch of potions in front of him. The girl had a large bag with many slots, from which she took out potions. Arito was surprised by its capacity. It holds 10 times more than it looks. Qualis doubted that Arito would be able to improve the potions, but he assured her that he could. He started with a recovery potion that restored 50 HP and cost about 2,000 gilii. Basically, the fire attribute is added to improve the efficiency, but the recovery items are water-based. These two attributes are incompatible together, so the best solution is to add more water. The owner liked the improved recovery potion. Now it costs 5 times more. Qualis appreciated the high level of Arito's skill. Now the boy needs to demonstrate his skill level to customers. The next upgrade is a potion that is in great demand among adventurers. It is distinguished by its high effectiveness against many types of monsters, because it contains a strong poison. Magic power in adventures. In adventures, Arito noted that these potions will sell for even more. Qualis likes quality work. However, the owner of the bag was left with an important mystery. She thought that in order to improve items, you usually need to concentrate with effort and frown. In addition, you would need to wait longer. The boy noted that it would be better to leave it a mystery, asking to take the rest of the potions with him and finish them at home for better concentration. Qualis allowed it and asked to upgrade the rest of the potions into antidotes. The owner promised the adventurer 80% of all proceeds from the sale of potions. In addition, she allowed him to choose one of her capacious bags. Arito was surprised that he would get a lot of things. Qualis thinks that this is not much to begin with. She asks the boy if he has the opportunity to improve his bag and make it more capacious, to give her the same. Arito thanks Qualis. The adventurer quickly ran home with memories of his first unforgettable job. He decided to finish the work he had started as soon as possible. Suddenly, strange sounds were heard around him, which attracted his attention. Someone asks for help. The stranger asked if he had seen the task. The guy asked if he was talking about the old fort. The first A-rank adventurers who entered it have not been found yet. It's been more than 2 weeks. Most of the adventurers are busy with the new dungeons. Only an S-rank team can do this. Within a week of the store opening, sales had reached an impressive 1 million gillies, which was an excellent result for such a new establishment. Arito has no clients at all, and his services go unnoticed due to his low fame. In addition, improving objects is not popular in society. The boy does not know how to change the situation. Qualis joked and visited her neighbor with advice. She noted that people rarely come without a reason, especially to strangers. In her opinion, no one would suddenly ask for equipment upgrades from a stranger. The shop owner advised Arito to change his approach. Instead of waiting for customers to bring items, it would be better to buy goods, improve them, and sell them. The boy asked Qualis how to do it correctly. Qualis noted that it is better to put the goods on sale to people or sell to large stores. Arito noted that the location of the store is not bad. Using a new idea, the reputation will increase, customers will appear. The owner noted that there would be a stable income. However, the boy noted that Qualis creates potions when she is in the mood. The girl replied that the store is her hobby. Arito decided to buy the items. Qualis emphasized that you first need to choose a method for obtaining items, as there are 3 of them: buying from other stores or from people, killing monsters, or ordering from adventurers. The girl noted that it would be necessary to take into account the size of the profit, efficiency. Arito understood Qualis, noting that he was weak, so it was better to order or buy products, but his main goal was to become a successful adventurer. After all, the boy was able to kill a B-rank monster with a magic sword, so if he stocked up on items and upgraded them, weak monsters wouldn't be a problem. Arito decided to kill monsters and get items. The adventurer thanked the owner and went to the store. Qualis went home. It became quiet. Leela is now at preparatory school until the evening, and Sira went on a trip with an old friend. They will be gone for several days. It turned out that Sierra had many acquaintances. The girl in the store wished the boy to get to the place carefully. The adventurer reached the branch of the drought trading company in the southern part of the city. This store is universal, so all the newcomers gather there, where there are many affordable and cheap goods. The boy decided to buy a weapon to be prepared for difficulties. Arito, who was used to fighting with a sword, carefully examined the assortment. His gaze stopped on a bronze sword, which caught his attention. This sword has been slightly improved. According to the illustration skill, when an item slot is given an attribute, it will no longer be possible to supplement it with attributes, even if it is the same attribute. Unlocking items is available from S-rank enhancement. The enhancement and rating show the total number of slots, but understanding the details requires experience and intuition, otherwise you can accidentally enhance the wrong slot. Such unfinished items could be bought cheaply and improved. They could then be sold at a higher price. Arito decided to look around carefully for such bargains. For more slots and better weapons, it's best to look in northern shops. The boy spotted armor priced at 600,000 gil, probably without the desired upgrades, so they're selling it cheap. Even if Aratil buys armor and upgrades the armor, no one will buy it, because you need to be very strong to wear such armor. It won't suit him. Suddenly, a girl peeked out, asking the adventurer's opinion. Sir replied that it suited him perfectly, but the armor was too heavy. The saleswoman noted that this armor did not suit all customers, but Arito said that he was buying armor. The girl understood him. The boy thanked the saleswoman for her purchase. Arito bought a steel sword and armor, which turned out to be very heavy. His arms ached from the strain, but he was pleased. Now he had the best item in the world. The boy managed to improve the bag from Qualis, increasing its capacity by 300 times. Now this bag became interdimensional and could store a huge number of items. After 3 days of trial and error, the adventurer managed to lighten the armor and sword, increasing their comfort. After successfully improving, he felt ready for the test. With confidence in his abilities, he headed home. Arito saw someone standing in front of his shop. The boy became curious about who this stranger was. She was wearing a cloak and looked like a real adventurer. Intrigued, he approached the girl and asked if she had come to see him and if she wanted to buy something. The girl threw herself into his arms and joyfully announced that she had finally found an adventurer. The stranger apologized for hugging Arito too tightly. The boy did not recognize the girl. The guys had recently met, but she was a little different. The adventurer guessed that Mrs. Milena was standing in front of him. The girl noted that Arito had dispelled the curse on her and saved her life. The boy noticed that Milena had changed. The girl noted that she could not even thank Arito enough, so Milena was ready to help the adventurer with any problems. The boy thanked the missus. Was Arito interested in an old woman like Milena? The girl was ready to teach the adventurer. The boy was surprised and asked Milena to tell him how she got the curse. The girl agreed to tell, not knowing where to start. She is an adventurer. Not long ago, her team was assigned to investigate a small old ford in the northern forest. It seems that a high-ranking demon has settled there. An A-rank team, hoping to find a connection between the recent Gilram dungeon and the old fort nearby, went there, but a black fog soon appeared. Milena heard that there was an incredibly dangerous monster there, but she never saw it with her own eyes, and then she was enveloped in a black fog and she doesn't remember anything else. Luckily, the girl was picked up by another squad. She was able to return home, but the people Milena went with disappeared. Last week, they were assigned to investigate the fort again. There are already adventurers ready to do it. There is a talented newcomer, the swordswoman. They say that she is a loner who always completes missions alone, a lone wolf, maybe because there are curses there. She decided to go with the priestess, a fellow adventurer. The priestess is also strange. She registered only 10 days ago, but hasn't completed a single quest. She has a very expensive staff and they say she's the daughter of some nobleman. It's strange that the swordswoman took the priestess with her. Arito remembered Samantha's words about Sarah being a newly registered adventurer, but being seen in the company of an experienced adventurer nicknamed Lone Wolf. The boy then asked Milena for the name of the priestess. The one who took the quest was called Dark. Milena remembered a young girl with dark skin. The priestess was called Kana. Arito thanked the missus for the answers, but he was sure that Milena was talking about Sarah. Mrs. stood up and was about to leave, apologizing for distracting the boy from his work. Milena also said that she needed help to strengthen something, so she would come again. Arito closed his shop. He thought that he would only become a hindrance and drag them down if he went along with the priestess and the swordswoman. The only thing the adventurer can do is believe and wait, but he had a request to make of Mrs. Qualis. The shop owner guessed that the boy needed a large amount of mana restoration potion. It turns out that Qualis found out about this when the guys moved into the 3 rooms above, since the walls of the building are quite thin, so the owner of the store asked to respect the neighbors if they wanted to misbehave. If Qualis's strongest rivals could find themselves in an unpleasant situation, she would not spare help. The girl led Arito behind the counter without explaining the reason, asking if he was in a hurry. At the same time, Dark was tired. Sarah asked her to be patient, explaining that it was hard for her to concentrate when she had to maintain the sanctuary at the same time. Dark apologized, as she did not want to complain. Dark noted that it was her fault more than anyone else that she was so relaxed and unprepared, but where did the demonic god come from? The armored guy asked Qualis Cloacer's son if they were going in the right direction, since they hadn't encountered any monsters or demons while they were walking. The girl replied that everything was fine and they would be there soon. Arito understood Qualis. The boys came to the place where Sierra is. The girl warned the adventurer. The black fog itself is not dangerous. It is a distortion of the magical essence, but it contains curses that, when inhaled, greatly reduce health. However, with Arito's armor, Qualis sees no problem. The boy agreed with the girl. It was strange that she noticed the improvements on the armor, because the thing looked the same on the outside. Now, the armor was steel and sacred, with an evil destruction zone and lightness. Qualis noted that Arito's armor had a similar sanctuary skill to Sarah's staff. The adventurer said that the fog wouldn't be such a problem, but the owner didn't need to go to such a dangerous place. Qualis replied that there was no reason to worry, since she could use her magic, but the protection was on him, so the girl asked him to protect her well. Arito agreed. The fog is thick, dark, and gloomy. You can't see anything at all. Qualis noted that you need to be careful. Suddenly, the guys saw a large number of monsters. The girl noted that the greeting turned out to be quite lively. Arito said that they needed to run, there was no time to talk. At this time, Dark noted that a demonic god would be much more dangerous. However, the girl is irritated by the fact that it is pointless to destroy the monster, since it comes back to life again. Sarah doesn't know, but she's almost finished healing. She asks Dark to hold on and endure a little longer, as defeating the monster requires the attribute of light, which Dark doesn't have. Meanwhile, Arito runs with Qualis, holding the girl in his arms. The shop owner is pleased, as it all feels like a princess hug. The adventurer needs to run faster. The monsters are very slow. Arito is sure that even if Qualis goes down, they will definitely not catch up with her, but the girl noted that she runs slowly, so they will definitely catch up with her. The fog is getting thicker. Monsters are oppressing the atmosphere. The shop owner is willing to go back for Arito's life, but the adventurer does not give up. The boys broke away from the monsters, but the fog was thicker in this place. It turned out that it was dangerous here too. Now the adventurer was cornered. Qualis noted that it seemed that this was the owner of this fort, since everyone was so afraid to enter. The fort's owner has a wandering magical armor. He has attributes, darkness, strength, agility. Arito noticed that the owner is too strong. He also has energy absorption, curse, dissolution, temple construction, light resistance, and self-healing. The owner of the fort has many very rare skills, but the most important thing is that he is the source of this black fog. Sierra saw Arito, surprised, and asked how he got there. The adventurer was glad that he made it in time. He noticed the exhausted people. Dark replied that these people were cursed by expansion. Arito noted that they were most likely members of Milena's crew. In turn, Dark introduced herself as a simple adventurer. The adventurer thought that Dark was too frivolous to be part of Sierra's team. Now is not the right time for dating. Qualis, however, has shown interest in Dark. The owner noted that the demon god's armor had become a demon, which is why Dark had problems. Under the influence of the owner and the accumulation of magical elements for a long time, an independent entity emerged. It turns out that these are the remains of the demon god, so to speak, but the demon does not cease to be an S-rank danger. Sarah is currently busy healing, so Qualis thinks that Arito is the best option. The boy gulped in horror. The adventurer was scared. The shop owner told Arito not to be so scared. If it were a real demon, the boy would be completely helpless against it, but now was not the time to chat. Qualis noticed that the main threat to the demon god's remains seemed to be Arito. The adventurer became scared as the demon began to approach him. If the demon attacks Arito, he must do something. However, the sword has not yet been improved and the boy does not have enough strength to hold it with one hand, so he must act quickly. The demon pounced on the adventurer, knocked him down. Now the armor value is gradually decreasing. The demon uses the skill, Dissolution. This is crazy, because when the armor drops to 0, it will melt and Arito will die. The adventurer urgently needs to come up with something. The armor can no longer be strengthened, the sword has flown away somewhere. What can be done with the demon's skill? This armor was used by a demon named Belial. It is said that whoever wears the armor will be cursed. This armor has a deformation curse, dark defense, increased physical strength, and size adjustment. If Arito changed all the slots to holy attribute skills, the curse would disappear. The adventurer was almost killed. He thought about the fortification slot. Qualis believes in Arito. It seemed that the adventurer understood what the girl had meant before. The boy reassured himself. He still had time because it was the same mechanism as when strengthening the sword. The adventurer can do this, so he tries to concentrate. He wants to open an upgrade slot, choose an attribute, and the fee he will provide. It remains to make the right choice. Arito decided to bet everything he could. At that moment, the monster made terrible sounds. It seemed the boy had won. Qualis confirmed that this was so. Arito is in shock. Dark praised the boy, noting that he must be tired. Sira is happy about the adventurer's victory. Qualis praised Arito. The boy is grateful to the girls, and especially Qualis for the useful advice. Arito sneezed. The girls were worried, because it was cold in this place, but they did not have spare clothes with them. The owner of the store noted that they could not go out in such a state. Belial's cursed armor has worn out. It is supposed to be an armor that automatically adjusts to the body. First, Arito frees up upgrade slots and strengthens the wind attribute to make it lighter. Perhaps the boy will be able to come to terms with his bad statistics, because now, the cursed armor gives increased physical strength, dark protection, and lightness. Arito put on the armor. He feels disgust. Apparently, this armor adjusts the body to itself, although usually it is the other way around. Over time, the boy gets used to this discomfort, but he completely forgot about the bunch of monsters. Qualis wondered when things would finally calm down. Arito noted that there was apparently no peace in sight. Dark rushed into battle. Amazing. There are quite a lot of monsters. Dark asked the boys to help. The shop owner believes that an adventurer can provide good support now, using this magical curse wisely. For Arito, this request is difficult, but there is nothing he can do, so he rushes into battle to help Dark. Suddenly, the girl, who had been exhausted until then, woke up on the floor. She asked if there was anyone there. Sira told the awakened girl that she had nothing to fear, because the one in the armor was not a monster, but its conqueror, but the girl did not believe her, because even the 3A rank adventurers were powerless. It's hard to believe, but the dark fog had already cleared. The girl who woke up realized this. When she woke up and decided to rest, a rumor had already spread in the city that there was a group that had captured the monster's lair and rescued the missing adventurers. It is said that this team consisted of Dark, the great swordswoman, Sarah, the priestess, and an unknown black knight. Leela prepared delicious food for the boys. Arito likes the look of the food. He is sure that Sarah will be happy too. The sister thinks that exploring the dungeons is amazing. The brother told her that he will tell her everything later. The brother and sister greeted the guests. Dark greeted them and apologized for disturbing them. Sira apologized as well, and Qualis appreciated the delicious appearance of the treat. The boys began to eat, talking to each other. Dark appreciated how well Leela cooked. Arito's feat, so Qualis refuses to reveal the details, and Dark believes that some things are better left unsaid. But the boy wants to get the reward for winning. The research took a long time, and Dark gave Arito his share, 7 million yen. That's a significant cashback. All transactions of the Gurika are recorded in history. The adventurer apologized for the disturbance. Sira told Arito not to worry. Qualis is grateful to the adventurer for the store. Dark is also grateful. The boy believes that all the girls he knows deserve his trust. In fact, Arito has something he wants to tell Leela, Qualis, Sarah, and Dark. He decided to talk to them honestly about his abilities. The boy told the girls everything, and they were delighted. Qualis asked if his story was a secret, since telling it could help business. The boy replied that it would cause problems, since he wanted to be an adventurer. Leela and Dark were delighted, but Sira and Qualis were shocked. Sira asked why he had raised the item enhancement skill to S then. The boy replied that his basic stats were low, so he had created the strongest equipment that suited him. Suddenly, Sarah, Dark, and Qualis began whispering behind Arido and Leel's backs, causing them to feel uneasy. Then the girls turned around and expressed their delight, praising Arido. The boy thanked his acquaintances. The adventurer promised to do everything possible. Now even at the hands of a dragon one can die. The girls celebrated his departure, and the life of a craftsman went smoothly for him. It was hardly worth it for him to give up this business. It's morning already. The boys were making noise until late yesterday. It looks like Leela is back in bed next to Arido. Qualis is nearby. Sierra sternly asked Qualis what she was doing there. Leela told her brother that it was already morning. Leela reported that breakfast was ready. Sierra and Qualis began to quarrel over the situation. The morning was too noisy. Dark said good morning. She had a lot of fun yesterday. Arito was surprised that Dark was here too. Everyone gathered and sat down to breakfast. Everyone liked the food. It was delicious. They started to hurry Leela because it was already late. Leela was about to leave. The boys wished her a good day. Dark noted that Arito's sister was doing well in prep school, asking what they would do without Leela. The guys started talking to the boy about his becoming an adventurer. He agrees that he has made a magic sword that barely reaches risk level B. The boy decides to try to save money, but stronger weapons cost much more. Qualis noted that strengthening and selling weapons is unprofitable. Dark warned that without raising Arito's stats, he won't be able to use strong weapons. Sierra added that combat skills are needed. Because of this, the boy decided to improve and sell the materials collected in battles. The dropped items are not expensive, and if you kill demons, you can improve your stats and save SP. The girls like his idea. Dark was surprised by Arito's thoughtfulness. Qualis admired his idea, and Sierra offered to help the adventurer. Arito noted that they were all good. Leela suddenly called her brother and said that she had forgotten the paper with the assignment on the table. She asked Arito to bring her the assignment during lunch. The boy noted that it would be bad if he didn't bring his sister the paper with the assignment, so he had to give it to her. The girls wondered what Arito was doing with the Gillica. The adventurer explained that he had improved the Gillica so that it could now make calls. He had further improved the chaos map and added a messaging function. The boy replied that messages are less noticeable than calls, so it is more convenient to communicate. You can contact people who have been added as friends. Girls are delighted with these functions. Dark noted that it was very useful and convenient. Sierra emphasized that Arito's special ability would soon manifest itself, and the store owner added that the boy had a talent for creating new items. Qualis suggested the adventurer to try a few more of these items. The boy thought that the new product could be sold exclusively. Dark asks to make her an improved Gillica. Sierra and Qualis also wanted an upgraded card, so the three girls handed their cards to Arito to upgrade. The boy doesn't mind, but there's a catch. The adventurer sat down to improve the Gillics of his familiar girls, but something went wrong. The boy decided to bring the documents for Leela while he remembered her task. There were some toys on the table. The adventurer searches for his sister's paper and finds a sheet asking about adventure items. He understands why his sister visited Qualis, even though it was his duty. Arito thought that he could be relied upon, but he was significantly inferior in knowledge and status. However, the boy did not give up and was ready to try hard. Finally, the adventurer began to put chaos into everything, and he managed to strengthen the objects. The girls he knew supported him and rejoiced at Arito's success. The girls started testing the call and message functions. The boy hopes that they will figure out the maps. Arito went to Riot Preparatory School, where his sister studies, and arrived on time. It's hard to believe that under the control of the Adventurers Guild, students with good recommendations pass without exams. A man at school noted that Lilu's abilities were among the best ever. Admission standards are easy to change, so you need to try hard before the entrance exams. A sister runs to meet her brother, who is proud of her. The sister apologized for disturbing her, to which the brother replied that it was nothing to worry about. Leela asked why Arito was worried, and he asked who the girl next to her was. Leela told the girl that the adventurer would not hurt her. The stranger introduced herself as Katarina. Arito introduced himself in return, asking if Katarina was his sister's friend. Leela herself answered that Katarina is her friend, but very shy. The boy can't imagine how the girls get along, although both are shy. The brother gave the paper with the task to his sister. Suddenly, a stranger appeared, asking what the students were doing here with some stranger. She said she would call the guards. Leela responded to the stranger, addressing her by the name Erika, that this was her brother. Erika looked at the boy suspiciously and asked if he was human. The girl, a stranger to Arito, pounced on him with questions, believing that he was ordering Leela to call him Big Brother. The boy said he didn't care what they said, because they were brother and sister. Arito noticed that Erika was nervous. Leela explained that her older brother had brought her something she had forgotten. Erika ordered the adventurer to leave immediately and asked the students to return as they had another practical lesson after lunch. Erika scolded Katarina, reminding her of the elf's dignity, and warned that she was asking for trouble and was getting what she deserved, so she should think with her head. That's why Katarina might not reach the intermediate level, so she should think carefully. The girl apologized to Erika, crying. The sensible girl continued to yell at Katarina because she started crying. Erika asks the crying girl to be mentally stronger next time. The angry girl runs away. Arito asks if Katarina is okay. The little sister asked if Erika was a princess. Katarina was her childhood friend, although she had a different status. Erika did not claim the throne because of her brother and sister and became an adventurer to achieve success on her own. Katarina said that she studied with Erika at this preparatory school and noted that the angry girl often worries about her. Arito doubted that the angry girl was saying this out of concern for Katarina. Then Brother Leela asked his sister's friend why she couldn't reach the intermediate level. In practical training, you have to fight the instructor. If your HP drops below a certain level during the fight, you fail the exam. In Katarina's case, it's harder to do, so she's useless. The students are allowed to restore health, but Leela's friend cannot use magic because she is not agile enough and it is difficult for her to retreat, take restorative medicine. Arito realized the problem. Leela's brother handed his sister's friend an exclusive potion to help Katarina reach the intermediate level. The girl took the potion. Arito returned home, having finished his business. Leela returned home. Her brother met her sister and asked how her day went. Leela thanked her brother. Katarina said she got a passing grade the first time thanks to her brother Lilu's advice and subjects. Sis said it was amazing. Katarina got it with one blow of a hammer. Sister Arito is surprised that her friend quickly understood what was going on, because she could not have handled it herself. It turns out that Leela's brother used memories from his past life about the hammer to help his sister's friend. Katarina had never used such an item before. The adventurer wanted to try something new on someone, an automatic recovery potion. It activates when HP drops to 50% and recovers automatically. Thanks to the victory of the girl Arito, will be able to better understand what to use the new potion for. Leela thanked her brother, noting that Katarina and the restoration potion had passed the test. Lilu's friend burst into tears. Katarina was congratulated on her success at the preparatory school. Even Erika complimented her, albeit reluctantly. Arito was sitting in the Regnum tool shop with potions. He yawned and dozed off. The man in the apron apologized for the wait and said that the test was complete. The potion was effective. Arito was truly a master of his craft. The man asked the boy to bring any amount of the tested product, because now it is the best product in the store. Arito thought that he is making a lot of money, and the store and customers are happy with the new product. The shop worker thanked the boy for his help, paying for the adventurer's services. Suddenly, the map fell out of Arito's hands. The boy apologized for being absent-minded. The man in the store remarked that the adventurer was overzealous. The worker wondered if the young man was having too much trouble. Arito looked sleepy, replying that everything was fine, he was having fun and was being paid directly. The worker then asked the boy to slow down, as sales were taking a long time. The adventurer promised to try, not knowing how much he could create. Arito realized that there would be an oversupply of goods. The man in the store noted that there was no point in torturing himself. The worker was glad that the adventurer helped Katarina, because she turned out to be his daughter. The boy asked how his daughter was doing. The man noted that it was all thanks to Leela with the big sword. They had been practicing for a long time. The worker thanked Arito for introducing him to his little sister. The adventurer said that Katarina always had potential. The man noted that she was his daughter, but if Arito did something to Katarina, he would not get away with it, since the girl's father would deal with the offender. The boy thought he was sleepy and dizzy. He decided to check his condition. It turned out that he was overtired. Unlike the debuff, it can't be cured with medicine or magic. Arito wants to do something about it. Overwork can cause another disease, but the adventurer does not want to die from it, although he has shot down the dragon 3 times and almost died. In a normal situation, this would simply be impossible. The boy had enough to do today. Arito went into the store and thanked Sarah-san, who had met him, for working in the sales department. There were no buyers. Sarah noticed that the adventurer looked pale. Arito said that he had overworked himself without realizing it. The boy's body was heavy. He was afraid of dying again. Arito doesn't want to die. Suddenly he sees a dragon with a bag, wishing him good morning. The boy was surprised. The dragon asked the adventurer if he was tired, noting that even if it was important, he shouldn't overexert himself. The other dragon was scared when Arito suddenly fell. The boy was confused, not understanding whether it was a dream or a fever. The dragons asked Arito if his stomach hurt, if his head was spinning, if they had any drinks for tiredness. The boy had a feeling of déjà vu, because there were 3 dragons. It seems the adventurer really overworked himself. If the hallucinations are incurable, maybe it really is easier for him to die? The dragons comforted the boy, promising to take care of him. Suddenly, Arito saw a dragon trying to feed him, emphasizing that he needed to eat properly. The boy replied that he was fine. The food looked quite appetizing. Arito liked the taste of the food. Qualis said it wasn't overwork, just tiredness. The boy replied that she might be right. It seems like everything has changed. It's strange that everything is so simple. If Arito was overtired, it would have taken him several days to recover. Sierra and Leela entered. They apologized to Arito and Qualis for the intrusion. The boys had a showdown over Arito and Qualis, who were accidentally seen together.